This conference will now be recorded.
Yesterday, we were discussing about what is value and how volumes will work in Kubernetes. We discussed host path value. Yesterday, we discussed host path value. Today, we'll try to understand about NFS value and also what is PV and the PVC with respect to the volumes. So, host path value. Yesterday, we created a host path value. Basically, host path value is nothing but a directory or a file which will get mounted to the container from the system where the pod is getting created. If the pods are moving around the cluster, if the pods are getting recreated in a different nodes, do we have a consistency in the data if we are using host path values? No. So that's where now we will use NFS value. What is NFS value? Right. What is NFS? Network file system. Okay. So we have a separate machine for using the data NFS, network file system. We will have a NFS server. Let's consider this is our NFS server. It's a separate machine. This NFS server file system, NFS server file system, we can use to mount our containers. I mean to say our pods. Suppose this is our pod in the Kubernetes. So this container, this pod will have a container, right? This container file system, this container file system can be mounted with this file system outside of the cluster. This is network file system, not the host path, not the local file system. External volumes, basically external storages, right? So similarly, if I am running my Kubernetes on the cloud, I can use other file systems, cloud file systems like EBS. Can I mount with EBS if my Kubernetes cluster is running on AWS Elastic Block Storage? Or you can use EFS. What is EFS, guys? We already know what is EFS. You can mount with EFS if required. What is EFS? Elastic file system. What is the difference between EFS and NFS? What is the difference between EFS and NFS? EFS is a managed network file system. EFS is a managed network file system, which means who is going to manage? EFS is nothing but it's a native NFS. AWS will manage. But NFS we have to manage ourselves, right? So you can mount with external storages. Now, if I mount with external storages like EFS or NFS or EBS, now if the pod is getting deleted and recreated in a different node, do we have a data consistency? If pod is deleted and moving around the cluster, do we have a data consistency? Because it's external value, right? And also, if this node itself is gone, do we need to worry about the data, the state of the pod, if this node itself also down, right? Because we have a data outside. So we can use NFS, EFS, or EBS, same way, whatever we used in the Docker, right? Now, let me demonstrate with NFS so that you will get an idea what is NFS also. So NFS is a network file system, shared file system, right? We can mount with multiple systems that we already know. Now let me set up a NFS server now. Let me set up a NFS server. So I'm going to create a one more server. I'm taking Ubuntu, whatever OS operating system you want to take, you can take. It is a NFS server. I'm creating this one for NFS server. So I'm creating one server. So this is for NFS. Maybe if you need more storage, right, you can increase the capacity, because this is the storage which you are trying to mount with your containers, right? So if you need more storage for NFS, you can increase the capacity based on the requirement, right? For now, I'm just taking like 15 GB. Let me, most importantly, security group. So what port needs to be opened, guys? What is the NFS port? Because I'm trying to set up NFS in this server. The clients, NFS clients will mount to this storage. On which port NFS will work? What is the NFS port? That is 2049. 2049. You need to open the NFS port. Again, is it recommended to open for everywhere, or only whatever IPs or whatever ranges you are trying to mount, whatever servers, the server range which you are trying to mount, whatever the server range. So here I'll open for the network range, this network range. So is our Kubernetes cluster, the servers are created in this range, right? Yes. So within this range, our Kubernetes clusters are created, right? Our Kubernetes cluster IPs, I mean to say our Kubernetes cluster servers, the workers and masters are in this range, right? So I'm opening for that. Let me create a server. Let me give a label for this. I mean to say tag NFS server. Now, will the server, is the server will be part of the cluster, guys? I mean to say, will this server is a worker node or master node? No, it is not a worker node or master node. It's just a server which we are trying to use as a NFS server. Do I need to install Docker, Kubernetes, any softwares in this one NFS server? No, only NFS software, NFS server software has to be configured. So let's wait. Once the server is ready, we'll try to connect and install the software. Let me see if I can connect to that server. So now here we will install NFS. I'm going to share that installation instructions with you guys. You can install NFS and you can configure. I will share the installation instructions. So first let me update the package manager. Then let me install NFS software now. This NFS software. So I'm trying to configure this server as a NFS server. We are installing this NFS server software. So here in this machine, I'm going to create one directory which I'm going to share with the clients, NFS clients. I'm trying to create a file system. I mean to say directory which I will mount with the NFS clients. So let me create one directory. You can create with whatever name. I'm creating something like this. Whatever name you want to give, you can give something like this. So this is the NFS directory which I'm planning to share, shared directory. So in that case, the clients, NFS clients will read and write the data to this directory. In that case, do we need to give permissions? I mean to say, there is no owner, there is no group for this directory because the clients is going to write, right? So we will change the permissions, ownership. No user, no group, right? Nobody, no group. Recursively for the directory. And also let me change the mode. I'm giving 777 based on your requirement. I'm giving 777 permissions for this directory. Then we need to grant NFS share access to the client systems. We need to grant the permissions to the client systems so that they can read and write the data. So now this will have some file. this will have some file. NFS will have this file, exports file. So here I am going to grant the permissions to the clients for that directory. This is my directory. Here I can give permissions, something like this. The NFS permissions. I mean to say what permissions? Read and write permissions, right? Sync, all the NFS options. These permissions. Here I can give a IP address also or range. Suppose if I give something like this, just I'm giving an example. Then this directory, NFS directory, NFS directory, I can mount with which system, which client, if I give something like this. Even though I open port for the network in the security group, but in the NFS, in this file, if I give something like this, does any machine can mount this directory? Or whatever IP I have given here, only that system can mount? Whatever IP I have given here, only that IP can mount, right? Or I can give a range, or I can give a star. If I give star, what does it mean? Here I can give star. What does it mean if I give star? Any IP. Or I can give a range, my network range, right? My network range. So now these are my clients now. These are my clients now. My Kubernetes servers are a clients because the parts in these servers we are going to mount with NFS. So these servers are the clients now for NFS. So can I give this range, IP range, instead of giving individual IPs of all these servers? This has a VPC, right? This is created in some VPC. In this VPC, the network range, that VPC range. This is the VPC range which we are trying to give. Right? Now, if I give something like this, any server in that VPC will be able to mount this directory. Now, yes. So this is the we are giving, configuring NFS clients. We are giving a permissions to the clients in this file. So let's save this file. Then to reflect those changes, you execute this command. And restart the service, NFS service. Restart the NFS service. So we have done, we configured NFS server. As we already know, what software is required in other machines if I want to mount in the client machines, what software is required? You already know, because in the EFS also we have done the same thing. But in the EFS, we have not created a server. We just created a EFS service. In the background, AWS is managing the NFS. But in the client machines, whatever client machines from where I want to mount, what software is required in the client machines? If you remember AWS, do we need to have a client software? NFS client software in the client machines to mount. So in my Kubernetes machines, I will install the client software. So what this is my Kubernetes master. In all the machines, in the masters and workers, I will install the client software. What is the client software? In case of Ubuntu, this is the client software. Since this is a Ubuntu server, this is the package name. But in case of Red Hat or CentOS, what was the package name we used? What was the package name we used? NFS utils in case of Red Hat or CentOS, right? This is Ubuntu, this is the package name, client software. This has to be done in all the servers because your pods may be scheduled in this node or this node or this node. So that pod has to mount with NFS, right? So in all the machine, you need to have a client software. Let me install. So do I need to do this every time or one time activity? Why in master? Maybe in future you want to schedule pods in the master. You want to schedule pods in the master and that pod you are trying to mount with NFS. In that case, will it work if you don't install? In the future, you may want to schedule a pod in the master also, right? If that pod has to use NFS value, if you don't have a client software in the master machine, will your pod will get mounted with NFS? No, right? That's why I am installing. Yes, guys, some parts will run in the master also, right? Some kind of a agent softwares. Some kind of a agent softwares has to be scheduled in the master also. Not may not be your applications. Already do we have some parts already running in the master? Agent can be monitoring agent, log agent, right? If you want to monitor your server, and master is also a server, right? Which you may need to monitor. So you need to schedule monitoring agents, log agents. But if you see, do we already have some parts running in the master? If you see, do you see master node is 15? Do you see already some parts like ViewNet is running in the master also? And also this, what is that? One more thing, Q proxy. So how these are being scheduled in the master? Because they are using that toleration, taints and toleration concept. So these parts are tolerating the taint whatever master node has. So that's why these parts also scheduled in the master. So similarly, if you want to monitor the servers, you are going to create a daemon set. In your master also you may need to schedule. In that case, you will tolerate those taints and parts will be scheduled in the master. And if that master has to use some value, in that case, I mean to say, if that part has to use the value, in that case, if you don't have that NFS utils installed, you cannot mount with NFS value. So now let me install. I already installed in one server 85. Let me install in another server. Now I have done with these changes. Now for my pods, whatever pods I want to mount, can I mount NFS value now instead of host path? Now we have this application. As of now, this Mongo database is using what type of value? What type of value this Mongo database is using as of now? If you see, host path value. Now, if I don't want to use host path, now can I use NFS? Since I have a NFS server configured and I have installed client softwares in all the machines. In whatever machine this pod gets scheduled, will it able to mount, that pod will be able to mount with NFS? Yes. So now how to do that? Now here, instead of host path, what I will say? The value. Instead of host path, I will say NFS. And here we will have a server. We will have one more field called server. Here I need to give a IP or host name. IP or host name. So which machine IP or host name I need to give here? Which server IP? I need to give a this NFS server IP. This NFS server IP. And also guys, in real time, you no need to have a public IP. You no need to have a public IP for this server. And also it no need to be in a public subnet. It will be in a private subnet. It can be in a private subnet. Even though it is in a private subnet, since the Kubernetes servers and this server is in same network, will the Kubernetes servers will be able to mount NFS server using private IP? The AWS concept, right? Yes. So I am going to take just private IP. And the path. What is the path here? What path I need to give? Whatever folder you have configured as a shared directory in your NFS. So what folder? mnt/nfs_share. Guys, is this name matters? I am using NFS, but here, do I need to change this one? Is this matter, or it can be anything? Here, the name. This can be anything. Whatever value name you have given here, with that name, what you are having? Whatever value you are having with this name, you are mapping that value with mounts, value mounts. Here, whatever I give, it can be here with say. But if you want to give some meaningful name, you give whatever name. Now will it work? Here I have a NFS, I have given a value name as this, but here mount as this. Will it work? No. So here also it should be same. Now this container directory, this Mongo database container directory will be mounted with which storage as per the values defined here with NFS server, this directory. Now, will the data will be stored in the cluster? This database data will be stored within the Kubernetes cluster. Since I am mounting with NFS, it will be stored in the NFS server. So before deploying, right, This is my NFS server. Do I have anything in that folder? I have not yet used it so far. So do I have anything in this directory? No. Now let me deploy this. Let me deploy this. Guys, what I do, I will delete this deployment and recreate. I will delete only Mongo database deployment and recreate, because sometimes because of the low resources, it is not able to come up. So I'm deleting this deployment, only Mongo database deployment. As of now, what type of value this deployment, this pod is using? As of now, this deployment, that pod is using host path value. So I deleted. Let me apply now. This pod is getting terminated. Now let me apply. Now I created a deployment for my database again. Now this deployment has created a replica set. Replica set has created a value. Now this time, this pod is using which type of value? As per our manifest, NFS. You see, pod is created, and also you describe the pod. To want more details, you describe the pod. Now you see values. What type of value we are using? Type. What type of value? NFS. What is the NFS server IP? Right? What is the path? This is the path. Right? So this got mounted with this directory. Now whatever data your container is generated in this directory, where exactly it is maintaining now? Where exactly it is maintaining now? In the NFS. Now if I go and see, some files might be already generated. So who written these files? Who generated these files here in this NFS server? Basically our database container. The database container, that database pod has a container, right? That container here. Now let me access my application, the front end. I don't know what is this IP, that service IP. What is the service IP? This one. Now, where exactly this data is getting maintained now? Process is running as a container. Process is, Mongo database is running as a container, basically pod. But that pod is, that pod is writing the data, where that pod is mounted with what type of storage? NFS. So this data is getting persisted or written in this server. Now, even though my cluster itself is gone, or even though my cluster itself is gone, do we have a data in the NFS server? And also, let's see if the parts are moving around the cluster also. If the parts are moving around the cluster, your database part as of now in this server, let me see. I'm intentionally deleting the pod. Now you see pod is rescheduled in 171, but still Even though it is scheduled to different server, we are not using host path value. We are using external value. In that case, still can I see the data? This data? Do you see? Still we have the data even though pod is rescheduled to another node. Right? If the pods are moving around the cluster, since because of some issue your pod got deleted, your pod got crashed, and since we have a controller, will it recreate that pod again? And again, since we are using the value, and again this time we are using external values, do we see the data consistency? Now again pod is moved to another node 85. Can I see all these records now also? Because it is using external value, right? And if this node itself went down, suppose what Kubernetes does, suppose this node went down, 85 node goes down, what Kubernetes does, because of some issue this 85 server is down, so what Kubernetes does, will it reschedule these parts to other nodes? Right? It will reschedule to other nodes. But if I was using host path value, will I have a data? Whatever data for that pod, it is already, will it maintain the state if I am using host path? But if I use external values, will it restore its state? Even though pod is scheduled to another node, will it restore its state, its data? Yes, right? So this is NFS value. Similarly, it supports EBS, it supports, suppose I am using Azure cloud. In AWS, what are the storage services we have, guys? In AWS, what are the storage services we have? EBS, EFS, and S3, right? Similarly, if I go for Azure, in Azure also you have a Azure file and Azure disk, something like this. So if my Kubernetes cluster is running in Azure cloud, can I use Azure storages, cloud storages? And also Google cloud. Google has Google persistent disk. Like it supports lot of values. But whatever value, I mean to say whatever storage, but what is the concept of value? Why we are using values? Whether you are using EBS storage, EFS storage, whatever it is, but what is the whole purpose of the value? To maintain the state, to maintain the state of the container, to maintain the data of your containers. Now, let's understand now very important concept, PV and PVC in Kubernetes. What is the meaning of PV? What is the full form of PV? Persistent value. And what is the meaning of PVC? Persistent value claim. So in Kubernetes, what is the recommended way to maintain the values or manage the values? Right. So far, in our Kubernetes manifest, I am directly giving what type of storage I want to use. What type of storage I want to use. But Kubernetes, there is a one more concept called persistent value and persistent value claims. Even though I am using values, right? Is it maintaining that information? Now I am using a value for my pods. But do you see, is that information is getting persisted? I mean to say the storage information, what type of storage you are using. So in Kubernetes, this is the recommended way to use the values. You create a value first, then you claim the value. You create a value first, then you claim the value for your requirement. As of now, we are directly using values, which is not getting persisted. I mean to say value information. So what is the recommended way? The way in Docker also. In Docker also we have a persistent values, right? In Docker also we used persistent values. What we have done in Docker? Did we created a value using Docker value create? Then did we use those values? Don't know, sir. Docker, it's almost 15 days back we discussed. We forgot everything. Do you guys remember, guys? In the Docker, we have created a value using Docker value create, and we use those values when we are creating a pods. Do you guys remember or no? So in Docker also we can directly mount the storage. In Docker also we can directly mount the storage, bind mounts. But what is the recommended way to use the values in the Docker also? Persistent values, right? So similarly here, as of now, I am directly mounting my storage with pods. Instead of that, what is the recommended way to use the values? We have a persistent value. Persistent value and persistent value claim. So what is persistent value? We have a persistent values. What is persistent value? Persistent value is a piece of storage in your cluster. So what pod represents? Pod represents your containers, right? Your process. Similarly, what volume represents in the Kubernetes? Volume represents a storage. So what pod represents, guys? Basically, the pod represents the process, your containers. Similarly, persistent volume is nothing but a piece of storage in your cluster. So similarly, how you have a disks in your server, persistent volume provides storage resources to the pods. Persistent volume provides storage. Persistent volume provides a storage resources to the pods. So in simple term, right, persistent volume you can think as a some kind of a storage. Persistent volume in simple term you can think as a some storage, some disk, right? So these persistent values exist independently from any pods that may consume this value. So persistent volume exists independently from the pods that may consume it. If the pod dies, the storage will still remain intact in the Kubernetes, right? So volume is nothing but a piece of storage. That persistent value can be created using any storage. Persistent value will represent storage that can be created using any storage. So persistent value PV represents basically storage. Persistent value provides storage resources. Storage resources to the objects. These objects are nothing but pods in the cluster. So persistent value can be created with any type of storage, like any type of storage, like again host path, EBS, NFS, Azure file, Azure disk, whatever. So if I have tried, if I have to use persistent value, what is the process of using the value for my pod? What needs to be done first? If I want to use persistent value for my pod, what needs to be done? First, I need to create what? First, I need to create a persistent value. Create a persistent value. If the already value is there, if the value is already available in my cluster, can I directly claim? If the value already exists, can I directly claim that value? If the value already exists, if that storage already exists, create a persistent value. Then what is the next step? We need to claim the value. Claim the value. Claim the persistent value by creating what? By creating a PVC. So Kubernetes cluster, you have a value. Your pods requires the value. In that case, you need to claim the value by creating a PVC and use that PVC. Use that PVC in your pod manifest. Don't get confused, guys. Persistent value is nothing but a storage. Persistent value provides storage resources to the pods. And again, persistent value can be created with any type of storage. Right? Persistent value can be created using host path storage, EBS, NFS, Azure file, Azure disk. Right? These kind of storages. So I can create a persistent value, and whoever requires the value, as a Kubernetes administrator, I can create the values. As a Kubernetes administrator, I can create the values in my cluster. And whoever want to use the values for their applications, their pods, whoever want to use values for their applications, their pods, what they need to do? They need to claim the value. They need to claim the persistent value by creating a PVC, right? So persistent value is basically a piece of storage in your cluster. It is basically a storage, right? So this persistent value exists independently from any pods that may consume it, right? So persistent values are provisioned in two ways. Persistent values are provisioned in two ways. Persistent values can be created in two ways. Very, very important, guys. Persistent values can be provisioned. I mean to say created in two ways. There are two types of persistent values. There are two types of persistent values. What are those? There are two types of persistent values. One is static value, another one is dynamic value. Static value and dynamic value. Persistent values can be created in two ways: static value and dynamic value. So what is the meaning of static value? Static value and dynamic value. So what is the meaning of static value? What is the meaning of dynamic value? These are very, very important, guys. Interview questions also. Let's consider this way. Can I claim the value if there is no value already available? Can I claim the value if the value is not available? So can I claim the value if the value is not already available? No. So how values can be created? How values can be created? There are two ways. One is what? Static value. What is the meaning of static value? Static value means as a Kubernetes administrator, we are creating the values manually. A static value means some of the Kubernetes administrator provisioned the value, created a value in the cluster, and it is ready to be used by the other resources, whoever wants. As a Kubernetes administrator, I can create a values and I can make it available for the pods. And whoever requests those values, what they need to simply do, as a Kubernetes administrator, I have created a values and I have made it available to the pods. So whoever needs the value, what they need to do? They simply need to claim. Static values are nothing but we are creating manually. What is the meaning of dynamic value? So someone is claiming the value. Someone is claiming the value. If there is no value available, someone is creating a PVC. They are claiming the value. They want a value. They are creating a PVC. If the value doesn't exist, there should be a way automatically value has to be created. So someone is creating a PVC. Someone is creating a PVC. Someone is claiming the value. If the value doesn't exist in the Kubernetes cluster, so there should be a way to automatically create a value, not manually, dynamically. So static values are nothing but we are creating values manually. We are creating values manually, right? And which is available to the users. Whoever wants the values, they can claim. Dynamic values are nothing but in some circumstances, pod require a value that doesn't exist. Pod require a value that doesn't exist. Someone created a claim for a value, the value doesn't exist. In these cases, it is possible to have a Kubernetes to create the value as needed. It is possible to have a Kubernetes create the value as required if storage class is configured. If storage class is configured, there is a concept called storage class. There is a concept called storage class. One more concept here. What is the storage class? The storage class is like nothing but but a plugin or a software which will create the values dynamically. If someone requested a value, using PVC, and if the value doesn't exist, the storage class will create the value dynamically. So static values are nothing but manually creating the values. Dynamic values are nothing but if the values are not available, if someone is trying to claim the value, if the values are not available, then values will be automatically created. And who will create the values in the background if that doesn't exist? Who will create the values if that doesn't exist? Who will create? The storage class. The storage class. Okay. So if you understand, in some circumstances, a pod could require a persistent value that doesn't exist. In those cases, it is possible to have a Kubernetes to provision the value as needed if storage class were configured, right? So values can be created in two ways, static values and dynamic values. If I have a storage class configured, in my Kubernetes cluster, in that case, if I want to use value for my pod, what step needs to be done? If storage class is not configured, we need to create a PV manually, if not already available, if values are not available, if storage class is not configured. But if I have a storage class configured, I mean to say dynamic values. In that case, what is the process of using the values? If storage class is configured, what is the process of using the values? Do I need to do this step? Do I need to create a PV? So what we will do directly? We are directly going to claim the PV by creating a PVC. If the PV not available, if the PV is not available to claim, in that case, who will create the PV if the storage class is configured? Who is going to create the persistent value and so that it can claim? The storage class. The storage class. So if you see, this is self-managed Kubernetes cluster. This is self-managed Kubernetes cluster. As of now, I have not created any PV, PVC manually also. Do I have any storage class in the self-managed Kubernetes cluster? Comes by default. The storage class is nothing but a provisioner, guys. The storage class is nothing but a provisioner, creator who is going to create the value, provisioner, value provisioner. Do I have any storage class, a provisioner to provision the values dynamically, to create the values dynamically? No. In that case, if anyone requires the value, can I directly do this way? Can I create a claim and can I use that PVC in my manifest? Will it work? Let me show this. Right. So volume is nothing but a piece of storage. volume is nothing but a piece of storage. Persistent volume is nothing but a piece of storage. Persistent volume provides storage resources to the pods. This can be created in two ways: static volume, dynamic volume. So dynamic volume is basically the storage class. The storage class will provision the volumes if the volume doesn't exist. Now, what is PVC? Persistent volume is nothing but a storage. What is PVC? Persistent volume claim. What is this PVC? Pod that need access to the storage. The pod that need access to the storage, persistent volume. They will get the access to the values through what? They will get the access to the values through PVC, persistent volume claim. So persistent volume claim will bind persistent volume to the pod. So when a pod want access to the volume, it will request the access to the volume using claim. It will request access to the claim, where we will specify what is the size of the storage you need, what type of access mode you need for that values, right? So claim is nothing but you are trying to get a PV with the help of PVC. You are claiming the value. It is like you have a LIC, right? If anything happens to you, what do? Right? You have a maybe LIC policies, right? Health policies, or maybe vehicle policies, insurance. If any damage happened to your vehicle, what do? Right? You are going to claim, right? Similarly, in Kubernetes, there is a storage, persistent value. There is a storage, persistent value that can be created manually or dynamically. If anyone requires the storage, I mean to say any pod requires the storage, how they will get the storage? With the help of what? With the help of PVC, by creating a PVC. By creating a PVC, they can mention how much storage they want and what is the access mode, what access mode, what type of access mode you want, right? So we have some type of access modes. The official documentation is very nice documentation, right? You can go through in detail also. So as I already told, persistent value is nothing but what? A piece of storage in the cluster that can be provisioned by an administrator manually or dynamically using storage class, right? So what is PVC? PVC is a request for a storage. PVC is nothing but a request for a value, whoever wants the value, right? So pods can claim, I mean to say pods can get the storage by creating a PVC. As I already told, life cycle of a value, right? As I already told, how can I create the values? How many ways I can provision? There are two ways to provision the values. One is static, another one is dynamic. Static value. A Kubernetes administrator creates the number of PVCs. So the PV will maintain the real storage, right? What type of storage you are trying to use, you can mention while creating a PV. So the persistent value is available for use by the Kubernetes users. Whoever wants the values, they can use these values, whatever is created, right? By using the claim. What is dynamic value? When none of the values are available in the cluster, when none of the values are available in the cluster, if someone is requesting a value using value claim, right, we can dynamically create a value based on the storage class. And if the storage class is configured dynamically. So if I just have a values, can I use the values in my pods directly, or I need to claim the values? How can I use the values? How can I bind my values? Can I directly use the PVs in my pod manifest, or do I need to claim? Do I need to create a PVC and use that PVC? What is the process? As I told, create the, I mean to say claim the PV by creating a PVC. Okay. Now we have some access modes. Access modes. So we can use any type of persistent values like Azure file, Azure disk, host path, right? And we have some access modes. Very important. Access modes. Persistent value can be mounted on the pods, right? That persistent value has a access modes. So when I initially I think there were only 3 access modes, but in latest version of the Kubernetes, they have given one more type of access mode. Earlier, we used to have only 3 access modes. Now they have introduced one more access mode. So values will have a access modes. Something like this. Access modes. Read write once. Read write once. Read only many. Read write many. Earlier we used to have only these 3. In latest Kubernetes version 1.22 version, they have introduced one more access mode. Read write once pod. So if I use read write once, if the access mode is read write once, what does it mean? The value can be mounted as a read write by a single node. That value can be mounted with pods from a same node. Can I use same value for 2 pods which are running in a different nodes if the access mode is read write once? If the access mode is read write once, can I use same value for 2 pods which is running in a 2 different nodes? If the access mode is read write once. Here itself you can understand, guys. It is self-explanatory. Read write once, which means the value can be mounted as read write only from a single node. Read only many. Read only values. If my access mode, if my value access mode is read only many, does it, which means, can I write the data to the value? Will your pods will be able to write the data? Or only it can read the data, whatever data you have in the storage, or it can write, or it can only read if the access mode is read only many. If the access mode is read only many, the value can be mounted read only from many nodes. Your pod cannot write anything. Your container cannot write anything to that storage. It can only read whatever already has. I can load some static data. I can load the data to my container, but container cannot write anything to the storage if the access mode is read only many. And what is read write many? What does it mean read write many? Can I use this if my access mode is my value access mode is read write many? Can I use same value for many nodes, many pods? So these access modes are very, very important. And also they have introduced recently. This is also I am seeing for the first time. read write once pod. So what does it mean there? Here itself it is self-explanatory. If the access mode is read write once pod, I can use the volume can be mounted as read write to a single pod. In the short form, read write once RWO, read only many ROX, read write many ROX. So volumes will have a access modes. Does all the volume supports all these access modes? Like we have a host path, EBS, NFS, Azure file, Azure disk. Does all the storages supports all these access modes? Again, no, right? If you see the table here itself, EBS, Elastic Block Store, will it support read write many? Does which means will it work with many nodes, many pods? Can I use same EBS value for multiple nodes, multiple pods? Does EBS supports that? In the AWS also we understand, right? Can we attach EBS to the multiple servers simultaneously? No. So similarly here, will it support read write many, read only many? No. It supports only what type of access mode? Read write once. This Azure file is like a NFS in the Azure. This Azure file is like a NFS in the Azure. In case of NFS, can we mount the NFS from multiple servers simultaneously, multiple nodes, multiple pods? It supports read write once, read only many, read write many, all those things. This Azure disk is like a block storage. This Azure disk is like a EBS in the AWS. So again, does Azure disk supports all the access modes? No. And if you see NFS, right? Does NFS supports all the access modes like read write once, read only many, read write many? So volume has a access modes. Volume has a access modes, right? Volumes has a access modes. Now, too much of theory. Now let's try to use the volumes first. Now I don't want to use something like this directly. I don't want to directly use the value, something like this. So instead of this way, I am going to use persistent volume concept. So I am deploying my application. I am deploying my application. I am deploying my application. I need a value. I need a value. So what is the recommended way to use the values? As I told, here I'll not mention what type of storage I need. Here I will say persistent volume claim. Persistent volume claim and claim name. Claim name. Some name. Mongo PVC. Now I am mentioning the claim name. And since I need a value, do I need to claim? Do I need to create a claim object by specifying how much storage I need, what type of access mode I am looking for this this pod? Do I need to create a claim object also now? If I just mention this claim name, will it work? If I just mention this claim name, will it work? Because do I need to, I need to mention what type of storage, I mean to say how much storage you are looking, what type of access mode you are expecting. Because do I have a claim already, guys? Do I have a claim with that name? Do we have the claim with that name? Do we have any PVC with that name? So since you are using value, you need to create a claim object, how much you need, what type of access you are looking. So I can create persistent value claim object. So I can create something like this, maybe here, or before creating or after creating, after referring also fine. I can create a claim object, something like this. API version, kind, metadata, name, and spec. So kind, what kind of object you want to create? Now what I want to create, what kind of object I want to create? In my pod manifest, what I am referring? I am referring a persistent value claim. So I need to create that persistent value claim. Persistent value claim. What is the API version for persistent value claim? V1. So the name should be what? Whatever name I am referring in my pod manifest. I am using volume of what type? Volume of persistent value claim. So here this is my claim name. So with this name I am creating a PVC. Here this is PVC specification, your persistent value specification, right? It will have something like this. It will have something like this, PVC. Something like this, PVC. So you create some additional options will be there, like additional options will be there. What type of access mode you are looking? What type of access mode you are looking for your pod based on the requirement? So here you have a access modes. So what are the access modes? Right? So you have some access modes. For your pod, what type of access mode you are looking? Something like this, access modes, right? For your pod, what type of access mode you are looking? What type of access mode value? So read write once based on your requirement. If I use read write once, if I mention replicas as 2, if those 2 pods are deployed in 2 different nodes, will this value work for those 2 pods? If the read write once, if I am creating a 2 pods, using this deployment, I am creating a 2 pods. Will that value work for both the pods? If you have that kind of requirement, you are creating a multiple pods and all the pods should have a same value. In that case, what type of access mode you need to go? Read write many. Read write many. So now I am using read write once access mode. For my pod, I am looking this type of value access mode. Then here resources, how much you need, how much storage you need. Suppose if I say, what does it mean? For this pod, how much volume, how much storage you are looking? So how much I'm looking? Just to give an example, here I have kept 1 GB. So you have a access mode, you have a resources. Now here I can mention the storage class if there is a storage class configured. But do I have any storage class configured in my cluster as of now? No. In that case, I am just creating a claim. Will the volume will be automatically created in this case? Our volume has to be created. Now, if I try to deploy without volume, without creating a volume, will my pod will come up, guys? Now I am just creating a claim. I am using that claim. Now will pod will be scheduled? Will pod will be created successfully? Now if you see, I am up, let me delete whatever deployment I already have. Now this is using directly NFS instead of PVC concept. Now let me apply this. First, let's see that is terminated. Okay. Now, if you see, I created a claim. If you see in my manifest, I created a PVC and I am using that PVC name in my pod manifest. You see why this is in pending state now? My pod, why it is in pending state? Why it is not in scheduled or running? So if you see, I created a PVC as per my requirement. As per my requirement, I created a PVC. But is PV is binded with, is this PVC is binded with any PV? First of all, do I have any PV available? No. Since there is no storage class configured, am I getting volumes automatically? Since there is no storage class configured, am I getting volumes automatically? We don't have any storage class. So in this case, do I need to create a volume as a Kubernetes administrator? If volumes were already available, if there were already volumes available, will this PVC will be able to bind to any of the value as per this requirement? If the volumes are already available, created, and as per whatever I am requesting, if the volumes are already available, will it bind automatically if it is already available? Yes. So I don't have a volumes. I need to create a volumes manually since we don't have a storage class. Now let me describe the pod and see what is the problem. What it is saying, guys? What it is saying? Pod has, what it is saying? Pod has unbounded value claims. It is not bounded with any value, right? Because there is no value first of all. And since there is no storage class configured, it is not creating a volumes automatically. In that case, do I need to create a value myself as a Kubernetes administrator? I can create whatever type of value. I can create whatever type of value, right? So API version, kind, metadata, name, and spec. So I'm creating a value manually. So what kind of object I'm creating? Persistent value. API version v1. Name, any name you can give. Any name you can give, that doesn't matter. This is a value name. Something like this I'm giving, NFSP. Now, the value, right? We are creating a value. Here you can mention what type of value you are creating, something like this. Something like this. What type of value, right? Capacity, how much, access mode is what, and what type of value, right? If you see something like this, you are creating a value name. What is the volume capacity of your value? Something like this. Whatever you want to give, the capacity of the value, the storage capacity, something like this I can give. Then what type of access mode? You are creating a volumes also with access mode, right? Something like this. Whatever you want to create. Guys, can I create NFS with read write once access mode also if required? Even though I'm using NFS value, can I create a read write access mode? Read write once, or can I use read write many, or read only many? Will it supports all these things? All these things as per the table, right? We discussed already. I can say read write many, read only many, something like this. Read write many. Now NFS, I can say something like this. NFS path and NFS server. So what is my path as per the NFS server? What is my path? What I have created? MNT slash NFS underscore share and IP address of my NFS server. Now I am creating a NFS value. But since the PVC expectation is not going to match with this PV, will it work? Because PVC, what is expecting? PVC is expecting what type of access mode? If you remember, what type of access mode? Guys, this is also one important question. How PVCs will be associated with PV? On which basis PVCs will bound with PV? Is it going to bound with name? Is it bound with name? Is it going to bound with names based on the names? How PV will be bounded with PVCs? This is one interview question. How PVC will be bounded with PVs? Based on the access mode, based on the storage capacities. So I am creating, I am expecting a value with what type of access mode and how much storage. Pod is expecting a value with what type of access mode? Read write once and storage 1 GB. Now I am creating a PVC. I am creating a PVC. Even though I have a, sorry, I am creating a PV. I am creating a PV. Even though I will have a PV, will that PVC will be binded with this PV? Will it bind if I create? Because you are expecting with a different access mode. The PV is having with a different access mode. Let me show that. Now we have a PV. We have a PV. We have a PV. It is still available. Why this PVC is not able to claim this PV even though PV is available? Why this PVC is not able to claim this PV? Because the access mode of PV is what? Read, write, many. But what type of access mode PVC is expecting? Read, write, read only, read, write once. Okay. So now let me do this. I can create whatever type of volume I want to create. Now let me create a one more type of value. So now, like I am creating a value with a different name, whatever name you want to give here, you can give. Now here, the access mode is read, write once. I am creating a value with this mode. Now here, this time I am trying to use host path, or you can use NFS, whatever it is. I am creating a host path value. Host path, path, whatever path. Now, if I create this value, will the claim will be able to associate with this value? Now I am going to create this value. I already have one value, but that claim is not mapping with that value. Now, this time, I created a host path value. It should claim. Okay, because there is a one more thing which I need to do, guys. Let me do one thing. The storage class name. The storage class name also I need to mention. Since you don't have any storage class, you need to mention as a manual storage class name as manual. You give some name because you don't have any storage class, right? You don't have any storage class, you give some name. I am giving as a manual. So let me delete this volume and recreate, because volumes cannot be modified. Volumes cannot be modified. Oh, somehow it is able to modify. Okay. Now storage class is manual. I created with storage class as manual. Now here also in PVC also you can mention, but if you see already it has bounded. Now do you see, is this volume is bounded with this PVC is bounded with that volume? Do you see, is this PVC is bounded with that volume? Now where are we using this PVC? Now will our pod is running up successfully? Is our pod is able to come up? Now do you see, is our pod is running? So we are using volume but not directly. We are using volume but not directly. So now we are using host path only as of now for this part. But what concept we used? We used persistent value and persistent value claim, right? Suppose if I have a storage class configured, do I need to create a value manually, or automatically the PVC will try to, if the PVC doesn't find PV, will the value will be automatically created? it will be automatically created. Okay. So I have a one more volume available. Can anyone claim this volume? Whoever wants the volume. Suppose someone want read write many volume, and will they able to claim this volume for their requirement? Some other pod. I want to deploy one more pod. So will they able to create a claim request? They can create a PVC with this access mode and this much capacity or less capacity, so that they will get this value. So tomorrow we'll continue, guys, how to create a dynamic volumes under. Tomorrow we'll continue. Tomorrow also we will continue on this volumes only. Okay? It's already late. We'll continue tomorrow. Whatever we discussed today, if the capacity is more, it will not claim, right? That is basic, right? You are expecting volume capacity is 1 GB. You are expecting 2 GB. You will not get the value. That is basic. We'll continue tomorrow, guys. Okay, it's already late. I need to start another class. We'll continue tomorrow. Thank you. Practice whatever we discussed today.